All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work in the Environmental Support Division of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and I welcome you to our Pellston PFAS investigation webinar for the Pellston Teacher and Student Recognition event. I'm glad to see several of you have joined us. In just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Steve Sliver. Before I do that, I just want to make a couple quick housekeeping remarks with regards to GoToWebinar in case you've never used it before. First of all, if you haven't noticed, all lines are muted, which means that you can hear us, but we can't hear you. And I'll explain just a minute how we can unmute your mics if you have a question. If you do have a question or you want to talk to us, that's no problem at all. All you need to do is if you use the little question box that you see on your toolbar there, you can type in your question or comment and we'll read it off. If you'd rather voice your question, feel free to click the little raise hand icon that you see on your toolbar. And what that does is tells us you got a question, you got a comment, and I'll go there and unmute your mic and let you know that it's, you're ready to talk. So that's another way we can do it. So just to remind you, if you have a question or comment, you can either click the raise hand icon or you can type something in the question box. And just let you all know that this meeting is being recorded, just so you know, and I'll share it with everyone as soon as we have it available. So if you want to share, you can. Those are all my housekeeping guidelines. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Sliver. So Steve, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Jim, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really my privilege to moderate this session today. I know it's kind of difficult in these times of doing all these things remotely, so I appreciate everybody joining as you can, and we'll get through this hopefully without me messing up too much on the technology. But so you can see here on this slide is the agenda today. We're going to do some recognition up front and then get some updates on the investigation underway in Pellston, and then have a Q&A session available when we're done with that. So go to the next slide if we could, Jim. So yeah, on behalf of the state of Michigan, I'd like to recognize and honor Pellston High School science teachers Steve Corlew and Brooke Groff, as well as the following Pellston High School students: Vivian Dyer, Zoe Ball, Samantha Christensen, Madison Hutchinson, Elizabeth Slater, Jaden Booth, and Jada Yapez, Bryn Warner, and Katie Schrock. Their scientific curiosity and dedication to protecting the health of Pellston's residents led to the Pellston PFAS investigation and the health protective actions by the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. Inspired and supported by their teachers, these Pellston students discovered concentrations of per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, in their neighbors' water after independently sampling private drinking water wells near the Pellston Regional Airport. This discovery swiftly led to water sampling, water filter distributions, and student-led community education. It is thanks to the work of these citizen scientists, the Pellston High School students and their teachers, that the water contamination was uncovered in Pellston and promptly addressed with a collaborative effort of state agencies, local health department, municipal entities, and community members. We encourage the Pellston students and their teachers to keep embracing their scientific curiosity, investigating the world around them, and sharing their knowledge to promote a safer and cleaner environmental future. Now I'll turn this over to Steve Corlew to introduce the students and to provide information on their activities that led to this recognition.
All right, Steve, you're unmuted, so go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Well, I'd like to tell you a brief story about how we came to this point. And so it is my pleasure to introduce these nine amazing students who have played a vital role in not only discovering PFAS in the wells of our community, but also educating community members of the harm that they can cause. For more than a year, Mrs. Groff's National Honor Society students, Elizabeth Slater, Zoe Ball, Samantha Christensen, Vivian Dyer, Jaden Booth, Bryn Warner, and Madison Hutchinson have been working with Freshwater Future to learn about PFAS and prepare in-home test kits for distribution. I incorporated the subject into my earth science curriculum, which includes the same group of students. We had been exploring current events associated with science throughout the year. Knowing about the PFAS contamination in Grayling, Escoda, and Rockford, we began our journey. After learning the basics about PFAS, we had students imagine that they were community leaders, tasked with educating the public about PFAS contamination. Students were to create an action plan and a mode of communication to inform residents. During our unit, we were fortunate to be invited to the University of Michigan Biological Station by Ann Bauman of Freshwater Future. Freshwater Future tests their water samples at U of M's lab. And one cold winter day, Ms. Groff and I took our science students to learn about the U of M's biostation, the Freshwater Future, U of M, and the Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council's partnership project to learn more about PFAS in drinking and surface water in northern Michigan, and how the test kits that some of the kids had put together were processed. We learned how the test kits were helping people around the country test their water. It was a fascinating experience and the highlight of the school year. On our way to leave, Anne suggested we take a few kits to test some of the students' wells, particularly because PFAS was detected in surface water samples of the Maple River that flows through Pellston. When we returned to school, we began using what we had learned in class to pinpoint the area that could possibly test positive. We discussed the firefighting foam that was commonly used at airports as a possible source. After our discussion, we sought out students who live in close proximity to Pellston Regional Airport. Later that week, Liz Slater toted a test kit to a student's house who lived within our target area. Freshwater Future and the University of Michigan Biostation processed the sample quickly, and surprisingly and unsurprisingly, it came back positive. This was the first confirmed case of elevated PFAS in Emmett County. The homeowner sent this result to Michigan's Department of the Environment, which caused a flurry of activity in and around our small community. The state responded and worked with us to begin more testing in and around the area. Town hall meetings were organized to help educate the community, and since then, the students have become ambassadors on this topic. The group we have here today have formed a youth water council dedicated to inform community members about the status of their drinking water. Knowing that this can be confusing and that many of the community members do not have internet access, the students have volunteered their time to answer questions from their neighbors. Recently, they organized a booth during parent-teacher conferences to discuss any questions people might have about PFAS. The passion these young people have for this topic is unmatched. It has been an honor to teach them and to watch them grow as leaders this year. Thank you for giving us the honor of being your teachers, and thank you to the state of Michigan for acknowledging their hard work and commitment to the residents of Pellston.
All right, thank you, Steve. It's a great story about a great group of folks there, and we really do appreciate all your efforts related to the Pellston PFAS investigation. And in recognition of those efforts, Governor Whitmer has provided tributes for each of you, and the state agencies have provided commemorative teamwork coins recognizing your leadership, teamwork, and excellence. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, those were all mailed to you rather than hand-delivered, of course. But really, thanks again for all your efforts. This recognition is well-deserved. So now I'll move on to the agenda item where we're going to introduce Christian Bond with the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy to provide an update on the investigation activities going forward. So, Christian?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. First of all, I want to say thank you to the students for bringing our attention to the PFAS impact in Pellston, and I'm going to describe, where we went with that initial data that was collected by the students. As Steve Corlew mentioned, it set off a chain of events in the small community. So I'm going to tell the story of, where we started in the investigation, the data we've collected so far, and then what the next steps are. You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, Christian, there you go. You can click on yourself if you want.
Okay. So what was the data that we started with in Pellston? From the 2018 to 2019 statewide PFAS sampling by Eagle, we had 4 data points. One for the Pellston High School and Middle School, another one for the Pellston Elementary School, and 2 other businesses, one on US 31 and another one on Robinson Road. Those were all non-detect. Then we received the freshwater future result from the resident on Pell Street in Pellston. We received that on January 30th. Eagle went out and resampled that on February 3rd to confirm those results. And we received those results on February 6th, and they were confirmed to be over the 70 part per trillion Eagle drinking water criteria. The Eagle drinking water criteria is 70 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS combined. So those are the 2 compounds that we look for to compare to criteria. As you guys know, there are many other PFAS compounds out there. It's been estimated up to 4,000 or more PFAS compounds exist. So with those data points, we had to look at, what's a possible source and what's the direction of groundwater flow. These PFAS contaminants get into the groundwater and then flow in the direction of groundwater with the watershed. So in Pellston, the watershed moves, groundwater moves with the direction of the west and east branch of the Maple River towards Burt Lake. So the groundwater flow direction is to the south-southeast. We also had one Eagle remediation site just east of the Pellston Regional Airport. That was a gas station that was remediated over the last few years. We had monitoring wells at that site that told us, the groundwater flow was to the south. So that let us put boundaries into place where we wanted to sample residents, because our number 1 priority was to find out who was affected by the PFAS impact, and then investigate further once we knew and gave those people a way to get clean drinking water. So we set our initial sampling areas south of the most likely source of PFAS, which was the Pellston Regional Airport. We had 2 other possible sources, a manufacturer near Mill Street that closed down a couple decades ago, and also a Pellston town dump off of US 31 that was used decades ago and was checked by Eagle for other contaminants. We canvassed the yellow area to make sure we got the word out and we got sampling requests out, and then had a town hall on February 11th. So by March 20th, our contractor AECOM had been out 3 separate weeks to collect residential samples. They collected 161 total samples from residences and businesses. I believe it's 151 residences that were sampled. 15 of those were over the 70 part per trillion criteria. You also see those are indicated by the red dots. There's also orange, which is the 10 to 70 part per trillion PFOA plus PFOS. There are 27 residences affected in that 10 to 70 range, 32 homes that had detections below 10 parts per trillion, and also 87 residences or other wells that were non-detect. Most of the impact and all of the 70 part per trillion plus, or the ones that exceeded the 70 part per trillion criteria, were to the west of Simpson Street or US 31 and north of Mill Street, directly south of the Pellston Regional Airport. We also collected samples from 5 wells at the closed Pellston Township dump. Those wells were installed in the early 2000s to look for other contaminants. There were no contaminants found to be affecting drinking water at that time, but we wanted to check those for PFAS as well. 3 of those wells were non-detect for PFAS, and 2 were in line with what we saw in residential wells in that area, with low detections below 10 parts per trillion. So at this point, it's safe to say that is not another source of PFAS contamination. Go to the next slide. We also looked at well depths. So of the 161 wells sampled, 57 wells had a well log associated with them. A lot of wells were installed earlier on, before the 1960s, and there's no record of the well logs, so we don't know the depths of a lot of those wells. So this gives us a little bit more of an idea of where PFAS is in the subsurface. And we found that all wells that were over the 70 parts per trillion, the 8 that we had well logs for were all at 100 feet or less in depth. So most of the PFAS contamination is in the 100-foot or less range below ground surface. We also see from this that there's wells next to each other at similar depths that have very different PFAS concentrations. So that tells us that there could be some preferential pathways or conduits where groundwater flows more easily, and we see higher concentrations in certain areas below the ground. So what are some of our next steps here? So we are going to extend the sampling area further to the south. If you remember from the slides before, we still have an orange and a yellow dot here. So we're not seeing all greens at the southern end of our sampling area. That's what we want to see. That tells us that we know where the end of the plume is. If you remember, groundwater flows from the northwest to the southeast. So that's why you see that direction of the sampling area. We also believe that groundwater should flow towards Lake Kathleen. But we are going to check some of these wells on the other side of the river, on Ringler Road. We want to check Woodland Road, just to make sure PFAS contaminants aren't getting to the other side of the river. We are, fortunate that there aren't many wells, on the west side of the west branch of the Maple River here. We're also fortunate that we don't see a lot of wells, in this other area southwest of the Pellston Regional Airport. It's a lot of state land and undeveloped land. You'll also see that, we feel that we're not going to see PFAS contamination in this northeastern portion of our sampling area, so we're cutting out some of these sampling areas. And we'll keep adjusting the sampling area as we receive more information, which takes us to some of our other steps. We've been in communication with Emmett County. They're looking at the source area. They've told us where they stored it and some of the areas where they trained with AFFF. They're going to look at 4 areas where they trained with AFFF. They're going to try to figure out what the concentrations are in those areas. And then we're going to look to them to install some monitoring wells. We are fully supporting them in getting their MDOT grant of $250,000 to do additional testing to put monitoring wells in so that we get more data on the subsurface so that we can better see where the highest concentrations are, how it's moving, how these contaminants are interacting with the west branch of the Maple River, and so on. And with that, I will introduce Lisa Fisher, toxicologist with the Department of Health and Human Services.
All right, thanks, Christian. So am I able to click to the next slide?
Yes, you should be able to, Lisa.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay, I'll just do it for you, so go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, like Christian said, my name is Lisa Fisher. I'm a toxicologist with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So I'm just gonna briefly go over some of the health concerns associated with PFAS, and then talk about the residential well water results, and then talk about the public health response actions based on those results. So just as an overview, just to remind you what some of the potential associated health effects are with PFAS. These are specific to either PFOA and or PFOS. But some of the health concerns include lowering a woman's chance of getting pregnant, increasing the chance of high blood pressure in pregnant women, increasing the chance of thyroid disease, that's specific to PFOA only, increasing cholesterol levels, changing immune response, and an increased chance of certain types of cancers such as kidney and testicular cancers. Next slide. So I just wanted to stress that if health problems were to occur, they don't happen immediately. So you're not going to see health effects show up over a short period of time. It might take years or even decades of being exposed to high levels of PFAS before you develop health problems. But even if you are exposed for a long period of time to elevated levels of PFAS in your drinking water, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will develop health effects. It just means that you're more likely to than someone who has not had that same exposure. Next slide. So when we look at your well water results, we look at the Part 201 cleanup criterion that Christian mentioned earlier. That's the 70 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS combined. But we also use these comparison values, which is basically looking at different screening levels that are health-based. So what I mean by health-based is that these screening levels are developed to be protective of all populations, and that includes sensitive populations such as fetuses or breastfed infants. So when we're looking at these comparison values, these are all health-based. They include the MDHHS public health drinking water screening levels and the MPART health-based values. And I also wanted to point out, you can see that there's a wide range of these health-based values. So for example, PFNA has a comparison value of 6 parts per trillion, whereas PFHXA is at 400,000 parts per trillion. And like Christian said, PFAS is a huge family of compounds. They don't all have the same chemical structure, and they have different half-lives in the human body. So for example, some of these that have a really high comparison value tend to have a shorter half-life in the human body. What that means is basically it would take a lot more or a lot higher amount of that PFAS to build up in the body before you would see health effects associated with it, compared to something that has a really long half-life and stays in the body for a long time that tends to build up faster just because your body's not getting rid of it as quickly. So I just wanted to point out why there's some differences between the comparison values and the different PFAS. Next slide. All right, so these are the results of the residential well water sampling. So there were 151 residential wells that were sampled. 86 of those had detections of PFAS. And of those 86, 41 of those wells exceeded one or more of the comparison values that were in the table before. and 14 of them exceeded the Part 201 cleanup criteria of 70 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS combined. Next slide. So how did we determine our public health response actions based on the residential well water results? So first we looked at the individual result from a house, and then we looked at all the results collectively. And we also took into consideration Eagle's investigation. What do they know about this site that can tell us where the contamination might be coming from? And then we also looked at the well depths and the geology in the area, which is mostly sand. So we used all of that information, and based on the information that we had, we decided that any home that had any detections of PFAS should receive a PFAS reducing filter. So that was handed out by the Health Department of Northwest Michigan. And then for any homes that didn't have any detections of PFAS, we decided that no public health actions were necessary at this time. And if your home was tested, you should have received a letter telling what your result was and what that result means, and then more information about PFAS in drinking water. And next, I'm going to hand it over to Scott Kinzerski from the Health Department of Northwest Michigan, and he's going to talk about the public health response actions that his team took.
Okay, good afternoon. I don't know if we're on the next slide, please. So our public health response really was focused on working with the community and working with the other regulating agencies and Emmett County and the townships and the village of Pellston to really look at protecting the residents that were at risk of PFAS contamination by providing them first with some interim controls, just assuring that they had a ready source of safe drinking water. And there were a number of steps that were involved in that effort. And then further to provide them with water filters, which presented a little bit of a logistical concern, trying to get filters installed.
Sorry, it looks like we just lost Steve for a minute. Steve, or Scott, I think it's Scott that we just lost. Scott, you there?
Yeah, I lost him too.
Okay, well, we might have to go back into Scott in just a minute here with that. I think what I want to do is remind everybody, if Scott wants to get himself queued back up again, is that if you have a question for the students, for Mr. Corlew, or for any of our panelists today, feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar toolbox, or the toolbar question box you have, or raise your hand, and that should be fine. So Scott, if you can hear us, you might want to just turn off your camera. That might help you out. We'll see what happens there. All right. Yeah, Scott, looks like we lost your audio. So we might have to come back to that. So I just want to remind everybody that we are all broadcasting from our homes, just like you. We're all working remotely, and so sometimes we have these issues with different types of internet connections. So Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add while I try to get Scott back on here?
Well, thanks, Jim, and you're right. I mean, the technology challenges us continuously, and hopefully I didn't jinx us when I mentioned that earlier. But no, I just wanted to again, say thanks to Scott for all of his work there in the community, and for Lisa and Christian for all your work and the presentations here today, and really open it up to questions as Scott tries to get back on. If anybody has questions, Jim, are you going to field those through the chat, and/or if people raise their hands, they can chime in? We would welcome questions.
Yeah, sure. We can answer questions as people have them. And just to let Mr. Corlew know, you are unmuted, and I'm also going to unmute Ms. Groff as well. So if either you want to make a comment, you can. Looks like we do have somebody's hand raised. Arnie, let me unmute you. You can go ahead and make a comment if you'd like, or a question.
Yes, Steve, I was just about to type it in. Great analysis and presentation today on these water sampling and comparison against your new criteria and these 2 steps. My question is, for sites where water quality residential testing was done, let's say in 2016, 17, 18, prior to the MCLs and some of these other comparisons, has anyone been going back to see if any significant findings can come out of a review like that, such as the well depths were not done at Wordsmith when it was found to be a problem in some of the residential wells?
So I'll start, and then, Lisa, you may want to, jump in as well. Is that, most, and I think if not all locations where we've gone through and identified source of contamination and then done investigations of private wells, the public health response, I think, has been pretty consistent, is that even in cases where they're not exceeding, like the 70 parts per trillion or any of the screening values that DHHS announced last April, they've still been offered presumptive remedies in almost all cases that I'm aware. And so I don't know that we've gone back and done retesting of those wells or further analysis of the wells. Instead, with the focus of the public health protective measures in place, trying to better characterize that plume. So, Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
Okay. I don't work on the Wordsmith site, so I'm a little hesitant to say what's been done. I'm not the most in tune person to that site. Some sites have had resampling done by MDHHS, but I can't remember if Wordsmith is one of those or not.
Yes, they have done more testing, but I have not heard where anyone is going through the trouble to determine the depths of those residential wells to see if there are potential stray plumes that are carrying it in other directions or higher concentrations.
And if I can add, Steve, once we have this residential sample data, DHHS is going to be resampling those. They have in Alpena and in Grayling this summer. Right now they're planning on resampling those wells in that area. But really, that is just a guide for the investigation. The most accurate samples are going to come from monitoring wells. So in Grayling, we put a network of monitoring wells in, sampling those quarterly, and then we can sample at multiple different intervals in the subsurface. We also have a very accurate log created by a geologist then, and that creates a much more accurate picture than looking at residential wells where you can have some of these preferential pathways that's created over time by drawing water through residential well screens.
That's a good point.
Sorry, I'm back. It booted me off.
Yeah,
Hey,
Scott's back.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I apologize. It booted me off for whatever reason, but I just wanted to thank the students and just say how powerful of a project you guys really worked on and engaged very, very quickly to get, to understand what the problem is in Pellston and really to protect the residents, the citizens within Pellston. And it's really important work. And I think I was saying we had a special Board of Health meeting where we recognized the students and provided them with a recognition certificate of public health heroes. And I really believe that. I believe in the work that you guys did, and I'm really pleased to see that even beyond your original project, that the work that you're doing is continuing within your community. So thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, we just kind of open it up to questions now. So
Yeah. So Steve, we do have a person who raised his hand, James Gillette. So go ahead and I just unmuted you, sir. Go ahead. So Mr. Gillette, if you want to make a comment, you just have to unmute your mic on your end and you can go ahead. There you go.
Hi, this is Jim Gillett. I am the village president here in Pellston, and I just wanted to call in and congratulate these students and their instructors for the great job that they did with their diligence and dedication to bring to our attention a situation that may not have been detected really for decades from now. And so again, on behalf of the village of Pellston, I congratulate the students and their instructor for the work that they have done.
yes,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. And Steve, we got a couple people who have typed in a couple questions, so I can read them off to you if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so the first question is, can both parents pass down PFAS to their children?
Sounds like a Lisa question.
It does sound like a Lisa question. I have not seen any literature that looks at associating PFAS with being passed down from parent to child as far as like health effects. As far as can PFAS be passed through the placenta and breast milk? Yes. But I haven't seen anything about, I think there's some animal studies that talk about developmental effects, but not necessarily in humans.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question. What is being provided to the families with the high results wells? Is the supply of drinking water enough, or is the water unsafe for all uses?
Lisa?
Yep. So the filter is a point of use filter that's going to go under your kitchen sink. That's being provided to anyone that had any detections of PFAS. And I know they're in the process of installing those right now. I don't know, Scott, if you were able to talk about this before you got cut off, but I think 63 filters have been installed already. It kind of got slowed down because of COVID, but those are in the process of being installed. And basically, what we're most concerned about is ingestion of that water. So drinking the water, cooking with the water, making formula with the water, that's the main route of exposure that we're concerned with for PFAS. As far as bathing, brushing your teeth, washing your dishes, that's not a major route of exposure for PFAS, so we're not as concerned with that. So generally speaking, drinking water is going to be your main route of exposure for PFAS.
All right. Next question that's come in is the Pellston PFAS pattern similar or close to the patterns that occurred in Grayling?
Christian.
Let me unmute myself. Yeah, so, the geology, as we've said before, is very similar. We see a, glacial sand deposit up to, 100 or more feet. They act very similarly. The same springs that we see on the Asavo, we see on the Maple River. And we see, the same distance, very similar distance that this plume is moving. Only difference is, in Grayling, we had more areas that were more spread out, so we almost see multiple plumes there. Whereas here in Pellston, it seems like it's mostly confined to, one plume that is headed to the south along the west branch of the Maple River.
Okay, thank you, Christian. We don't have any more questions that have come in to the queue. We got a couple of nice comments. from a couple of our attendees. One person saying, I'm so proud of all of our students and Mr. Corlew and Mrs. Groff for your hard work and dedication to our community. And we've got another one here. It says, thank you so much. I'm very proud to be part of such a great school. All right. Oh, here's another one just came in. I live about a mile northwest of the airport. Should I get my well tested?
Christian?
Yep, I'll answer that. So as you saw before, and as I described, so groundwater is going to move from higher elevations from your headwaters in your river system to, you know, what we call base level, which is Burt Lake in this case. So we expect contaminants to flow with the direction of groundwater flow. So from our source area, our most likely source area, which is the Pellston Airport, it's going to move straight to the south. So areas northwest, northeast of the airfield, they're not going to be in the line of that plume. So you're not inside our sampling area, and there's no recommendation for PFAS sampling at a residence outside of our sampling areas.
All right, thanks. I do have another hand raised. Mr. Jones, I just unmuted your mic, so go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Thanks. This is DJ, David Jones, with the Petoskey Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation. And I guess I would add my, obviously, congratulations to the students and staff at the school, too. What a great discovery and find. So, and maybe this is better for tonight's town hall meeting. I don't know, but, you know, the Community Foundation was pleased to provide some dollars quickly through Freshwater Future for the filters in some of the homes, and which is certainly a great short-term resolution. But what is the long-term fix here for these residential homes there? How are we going to do this long-term? Thank you very much.
Christian to start.
I can start with that. So, you know, ideally, first we figure out, you know, where the contaminants are going, and then we put in some sort of remedy. You can dig out soils. You can put in carbon into the ground to stop a plume from moving and trap that PFAS, so that it doesn't affect down gradient or downhill homes. That's a possible remedy. Putting in, you know, small municipal supplies is always an option as well. I know in Grayling, the military for homes that are over the 70 part per trillion criteria, they've put in what's called a time critical removal action, which is basically, you know, taking care of those people that are over the criteria and remedying their situation as quickly as possible. Their remedies have included extending city water where feasible, and also putting in whole house filtration systems. You can do that with a reverse osmosis system or with a carbon treatment system. So those are possible remedies as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just to add to that, MDHHS will provide cartridges for those filters until a permanent solution has been decided on.
Well, great, thank you. I was going to ask about the maintenance of the filters, so thank you.
And right now, when the filters are installed, they also get a replacement cartridge with those, and then we keep a record of an acknowledgement form. And if people, you know, if this extends beyond that first cartridge change and they need another one, we have them on record, and we can provide those additional replacement cartridges.
Okay, just looking for more questions, and I don't have any more here, Steve.
Okay, all right.
So if you want to go ahead and, yeah, go ahead.
Sure, and if you'd like, if you go to that last slide there.
Okay.
And it was already mentioned that we have a town hall update this evening, and another one be done remotely like this one. and might have an opportunity for more expanded conversation on the investigation and response at that time. And encourage anybody here today, if you can join that, please do. And there's also a phone number to call in if you don't have the web access. But again, I appreciate everybody joining us today. And again, want to congratulate the teachers and students at the school for really making this all happen. And so it's a great testament to your initiative, and we've got a public health response because of that. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining, and thanks to the panelists here today for your presentations and for taking the questions. And Jim, other than that, I think we're pretty much done then.